Hey, what's up YouTube fans? So what I wanted to talk about a little bit on this video, right, is the evolution of the ability to fly, right? For some people, it could be a bit of a stumper for them to understand how the ability to fly could ever come about evolutionarily, even if they understand evolutionary processes like natural selection, right, which I made a video about last night. You know, for anyone that understands how natural selection works, it shouldn't be too much of a stretch of the imagination to understand how, a species that already can fly can become better at flying as they adapt over time, that they could become more and more skilled at flying. But how do we go from something that is not able to fly to something that can evolutionarily? Because, it's a very complex ability that would not be likely to come about in a single mutation, right? So you need a series of steps, and each of those steps has to be useful in its own right. So going off of the creationist argument of irreducible complexity, someone might say, what will be the point of any of these intermediate steps if you need to have all of the traits at once in order to be able to fly? What will be the use of any of these intermediate steps then leading up to it? Let's tackle that. The first off, appendages that could later be used as wings could also be used as for, other purposes, right? So in the case of bats, birds, and pterosaurs, they're all tetrapods, so their wings are limbs, right, which have all the same bones in them as in your arms, right? Humerus, radius, ulna, carpals, metacarpals, and phalanges, right? It's the same bone structure as we see in the fins of whales and in the legs of elephants and horses. These limbs can be used for many purposes, including, walking, climbing, flying, and in the case of us humans, designing complex machines, right? That in of itself demonstrates that the step of evolving the limbs, which now are used as wings, that could be useful in its own right, because it could just as well be useful for other purposes like walking. But okay, there's still a long way to go, right? Because an elephant has humerus, radius, ulna, carpals, metacarpals, and phalanges, but it's nowhere near being able to fly. So still, how do we get the rest of the steps? Well, there's a few differing potential pathways, but one thing worth considering, right, is that there are many differing animal groups that have the ability to glide, right, which is simpler than full-on flight, right, but it involves much of the same traits that, help with the ability to glide, right? And there's actually more animal groups that have evolved the ability to glide than there are that have evolved the full-on ability to fly, right? There's some squirrels that can glide, some frogs that can glide, even some fish that can glide, right? There are many different animal groups that can glide without being able to full-on fly, right? And so if you can understand how a species that already can fly could become better and better adapted at flying, more and more skilled at it as they adapt over time through the process of natural selection, likewise, you should be able to understand that a species that can already glide, right, could become better and better adapted at gliding, right? And so then what could potentially happen, right, is that you could have a transition then from the most complex version of gliding possible to the simplest version of flying possible, right? And then from there, they become better and better at flying, right? And this of course begs the question of how do you get the how do you evolutionarily get the ability to glide, right? Well, the ability to glide, right, is simpler, right? It's not as complicated of a process, right? And there are potential precursors to that as well, right? Because there are many small creatures that climb up in trees and hop from tree to tree, right? And not all creatures that do that have the ability to glide, right? And something as simple as evolving, flaps of skin between their limbs for a small creature, that could be enough to make them have the ability to glide, right? When they jump from tree to tree, and so they can become better and better at it over time, right? And so this is a perfect example of, at first glance, something could seem as like a impassable evolutionary barrier that, oh, how could it ever come about evolutionarily, right? But when you think about it and you look into different example like intermediates that we have still alive today, it makes perfect sense, right? All right, that's all for now. See you guys.